Bonjour, c'est moi, Rebecca, et aujourd'hui j'ai une nouvelle vidéo pour vous. Pour ceux qui connaissent ma chaîne et connaissent mes vidéos, ça va être très différent que les autres vidéos. Je ne suis pas dans ma cuisine, je ne prépare pas de recettes. Comme j'ai dit, ça va être complètement différent que les autres vidéos. J'espère que vous l'aimez quand même et je vais passer à l'anglais maintenant parce que la vidéo va être en anglais. Alright, so like I mentioned, this video is not going to be like any of the other videos on my channel, starting with the fact that it's going to be in English. I was on YouTube a couple of days ago and I found the Frenchly channel, which I'd seen before, but I found a new video called Questions Americans Ask About France According to Google. So the premise of the video is that Frenchly got a list of somewhat common questions that Americans have searched for on the Google search engine. And they also got together a group of French people, and when they filmed the reaction of the French people to learning kind of what those questions are that Americans asked. I will say I don't think these are the most common questions that Americans ask using Google about France, but they're common enough, I guess, that they came up on auto-populate. So Frenchly's video is the reaction of the French people to the questions, and this video I thought it might be interesting to do an American reacts to the French people's reactions to American questions. So it's a little convoluted, but I have some thoughts for sure on this topic. And I thought it might be interesting, and I hope you don't mind kind of the different video today. Before we get into it, I'll just say I consider myself very American in that both of my parents' families have been in America for at least 100 years, for several generations. My mom's family is from Middle America, kind of farmland. And my dad was actually born in Puerto Rico, which is a territory of America. And that in itself can kind of feel very different, especially from the continental United States. But he grew up in New York City. So I think I have a very, pretty common American background. But I'm not your typical American in that I am so interested in France and French culture, French language, Francophone studies, all that. The average American is not that interested, definitely not as much as I am, because I studied French for 10 years, 4 in high school, which is our lycée, and then 6 at the college level. So I thought, I might be able to give some ideas on where these questions are coming from, or just kind of my opinions on it all. So let's get into it.
Is this a real question that people are asking?
Is France a country?
No reaction.
If you don't know that France is a country, then you've had a very bad geography teacher.
Next question.
I do believe that people from abroad with not a lot of culture think that Paris is the country and maybe France is the capital.
So I definitely have to agree with the guy who said that if you don't know that France is a country, you had a really bad geography teacher. In the United States, every state has different requirements for graduation for that end of public school, the high school level graduation, after which you can go to college or trade school or just start working. But European history, I'm pretty sure, is just a standard. And it's at that high school level, so, it's a little more intense than if you were a child and learning it. I remember taking European history in 9th grade, which is the first year of high school. High school goes 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. And for sure, we learned all of the countries. We had to memorize the the geography of them, memorize the capitals, and then recreate them on a map. So we definitely were taught that. It just depends on if you retained it. And what the last girl mentioned was kind of interesting too. It could very well be that some people just know Paris much more than France. Americans have this love affair with Paris that goes back, I think, centuries, and it's just kind of ingrained with inside of us. So it definitely could be that we focus more on Paris, but I would say that's the minority, and the majority of people have been taught for sure that Paris is the capital of France. Is France in Italy?
Very good question, which means pretty much nothing.
I would say not at all. We are friends. We're living near each other.
I understand why the American people can make a mistake about this, because we are the first country in the world eating pizza.
So for this one, I actually didn't know what the guy at the very end said, which is that France eats more pizza than Italy. I had no idea about that. I don't think most Americans know that, so I don't think that's the reason for this question. I think maybe it's just confusion over European geography, and it's not a lot because, like I said, Americans love France. They also really love Italy, so I think that they know the two are separate. I think, isn't Paris the #1 tourist attraction in the world? So I think I think most people know the difference. Obviously, there are some people who are a little bit confused. And interestingly, what I thought I'd add here is, like I mentioned in the earlier question, we take European history, at least my experience was in the 9th grade. And a year later, we took American history, and similarly to the geography of Europe, where I had to memorize all of the countries and their borders and their capitals, for American history, I had to memorize all the states and their capitals. So again, I had to kind of recreate that map with all the states, all 50 states and District of Columbia, and everyone's capital. So it could be kind of that it didn't stick when we learned it in European history, and we had to kind of clear that part of our brain out so we could memorize all 50 states. A lot of people are confused about our own geography anyway in America. I grew up in New York, but I live in Iowa now, and a lot of people back home from where I'm from get Iowa confused with Idaho or Indiana. So it's a lot of things to keep straight, and not to say that that's an excuse, but for those who don't, who needed to rely on Google to see if France is part of Italy, that's probably why. But definitely I would say that's, again, the minority, not the majority. Most of the people I know, my friends and family, and not just because I'm so interested in France, but most of them know that it's its own place. Is France socialist?
Yes. Definitely.
Yes, because François Hollande.
For me, it's not a really dumb question.
Definitely.
We are a really socialist country, chauvinist as well, and very patriotic.
France is a pretty liberal country, not as liberal as America. We just got a good social healthcare.
So I can't say I'm surprised that this question came up. What's interesting to me is that there's different perspectives to look at this question. When I first started studying French, this was over 15 years ago, it was I would get asked that. It was like a talking point when people found out that I was studying French or interested in France, especially as I grew and continued to study it past kind of the required level. It was just something people would say, oh, isn't France socialist? And that would be like the end of it. And that was a very interesting thing because it was always kind of in a negative spin back then, even though I grew up on the East Coast, and compared to where I live now, for sure, it's a lot more liberal there. But it was just something people said because maybe they didn't know what else to say. And it was just, like I said, kind of a talking point and kind of led into a conversation, but not really. Now I would say I don't hear it as much, but if I were to, it would be more of an inquisitive question, and I could see people really, being more open to doing things differently than we've always done, thinking about new ways of government and things like that. So I could see people Googling that to see how the French people feel about being socialist and what their lives are like and how their healthcare is and how their taxes are. So it's very interesting to me to kind of think of it over the course of the almost 2 decades that I've been studying French and how that could be different from back then till now. And now we're definitely getting to be a little more open and wanting to know more about other cultures rather than just saying, oh, we're right and they're wrong. Does France have a king?
What?
Yes. Emmanuel Macron.
Yes, me. Oh, Zinedine Zidane, maybe.
We used to have a king, but it didn't go well for him. If you heard of the guillotine, we chopped the head off.
UK and Spain, they all have kings. Maybe people are like a little lost.
So I loved that they included this question. I'm so glad that it came up because it was really, really interesting for me to see the French people's reactions to this question, which seemed almost overwhelmingly surprised, almost like it was laughable that Americans would be asking about that. And for me, it wasn't a surprise at all. I kind of explained a little bit about our history requirements, at least for me, about 15 years ago. I took European history one full year at the high school level, and then the next year was American history. And I will tell you 99.9% positive that if nothing else, the average American will remember Marie Antoinette from their European history class. They won't remember, all of the history of the Renaissance and starting in Italy or artists or, the Protestant Reformation, all the wars in England. If they forget everything else, they will remember Marie Antoinette, and they will remember that they chopped her head off. They will remember that she was French, and they might remember let them eat cake, but they'll probably also remember that she had a husband named Louis. And maybe remember that he was killed. But so I think we have that idea that we know that at one point the monarchy was killed, but the average American doesn't know about the Restoration or about the 2 empires or the 5 republics. I would say, unfortunately, that's not something that maybe we're even taught unless you studied longer like I did. But for sure, we know Marie Antoinette. That's just like a cultural thing. I feel like we all know her. We're all fascinated by her. A lot of people, if you think of when Americans go to France, they'll go to Paris, and it's nice that Versailles is right there because then you can just head on over and relive, Marie Antoinette's life over there. So what the last speaker mentioned about, the maybe being confused because of the British royals and the Spanish royals, I don't think it's that. If anything, Americans know the British royals and that's it. I personally find the other European houses really interesting and royal families, but unfortunately, it's kind of like, most Americans don't learn another language because enough people in the world speak English. Most Americans don't, feel the need to search out other foreign or other royal families because the British royals speak English and are written about in English. So that was just my thoughts on that question. Do French people shave?
No, obviously, they don't.
Yes, we do. We are human.
We don't have money to buy razors.
Look, fresh shave from this morning.
We are shaving, girls, guys, and we are also getting shower.
I think that's just something that gets carried from one nation to the other, because French people say that usually the Portuguese are dirty.
So this one is unfortunately a stereotype just for whatever reason, I have some thoughts, but especially when I was younger and first starting to learn French, I would, another kind of talking point, people would say, well, don't French women not shave, and don't French people smell? And thankfully that's not as common anymore. I still talk about France. I still travel to France when we're not under quarantine, and I honestly haven't heard that in a very long time, which is good. But when I was younger, I did. I don't know where that idea of kind of a woman not shaving comes from. I will say, when I studied abroad in Paris, my roommates did mention that I seemed a little more obsessed with hygiene than they were used to. In America, we tend to shower every day. Even if we don't wash our hair, we'll shower every day, and we wear deodorant, and we have a big market for that, and a big market for cologne and body spray or perfume. I don't personally wear like any kind of fragrance because my whole family's pretty much sensitive to that, but for sure I take a shower and wear deodorant every day. So that was an interesting just point that my roommates brought up when I was living in Paris. I think for this one, though, you also have to think of how do most Americans get their perceptions of France outside of like a movie. But if Americans go to France, they're probably going to Paris. And if they go to Paris, they're probably going in the summer because that's when we tend to go on vacation. And think of like Paris in the summer and the metro. Like I've had the unfortunate, displeasure of being in the metro in June and July when it's really hot, and it smells. And if you're walking around outside a lot, which we tend to do when we go to Europe, and Europeans tend to do because they're living in a city and they don't have cars, you could have that body odor. So I'm thinking it has to do from that as well. But yeah, it's a stereotype that's just kind of continued on. Even people who have never met a French person kind of have that stereotype, but definitely less now than in the past, for sure. What do French people eat for breakfast?
Italian food, because it's part of Italy.
Escargot.
The typical French breakfast is a sweet breakfast. So you want to have a croissant, you want to have a pain au chocolat.
4 quarts. It's like a traditional cake from like the area of Bretagne.
We only eat sweet, not like German with sausage every day.
So first of all, can I just say I love this question because to me it sounds like someone has a book report or a presentation in class, like a child or a young adult has to do a presentation on France. And so one of the questions they're Googling is what they eat for breakfast. But there's definitely differences between American breakfast and Mexican breakfast and British breakfast and French breakfast. We all have kind of our cultural norms, and I would say Americans do eat carbs, but different obviously than the French. So you guys tend to eat a lot of carbs in bread and stuff like that. Our carbs are more so toast, but that's usually a side of a larger meal. Bagels, which is like 4 slices of bread in one, and then pancakes and waffles, but they take a little more time to prepare, so those are kind of saved for the weekend. So our convenience breakfasts, during the week are cereal and milk probably, and eggs. A lot of us eat eggs. I personally eat eggs every day. My family eats a lot of eggs. So more protein just because of that. On the weekends, like I said, we'll do pancakes with butter and syrup. That's how we usually eat it, or waffles with butter and syrup. And then, since we have more time in the morning, that's when we'll add like bacon or sausage or ham. I don't know people who eat that every morning, maybe on a farm or something, but it's a lot of effort, when you're trying to get out the door. So definitely a little more protein than your typical breakfast, and a lot more heartier of a breakfast. That's kind of a cultural thing too. I know when I did tests as a kid, my mom would always make me eggs. So why do the French smoke?
Let's just speak about Parisians. they're so stressed and angry about like that they need to smoke.
I'm not smoking, but I feel like a lot of my guy friends and girlfriends has been smoking because it was stylish.
It's like, you smoke, so I smoke. It's cool, you know?
We blow hearts with our smoke. That's our way to say I love you in French.
This one, I don't think we're that far apart. It's kind of like the one girl said, it's a social thing. So if you have friends in America, if you have friends who smoke, you're more likely to smoke and things like that. We do kind of have that stereotype of the French person. The traditional stereotype would be, you know, a French person, skinny, pale, with a striped Breton shirt and a beret, you know, smoking a cigarette. So that's something that kind of haunts the French, I would say, in America. But we smoke too. I mean, I don't, but people at work I know, you know, have regular smoke breaks. And where I live, it's really cold, and they have even a trailer in the basement for smokers in the winter. So it's not like none of us smoke, even though there has been a push, I would say, for at least the last 20 years since I was young, just to kind of encourage people to never even take up smoking because it's such a challenge to quit it. But if you think about it, if you watch old Hollywood movies or TV shows, I mean, Americans used to smoke a lot. So we have changed, you know, maybe a little bit more than you guys. But and then I wanted to also say this, you have to also think of, again, how do Americans get their perception of French people when we go to Paris? You know, just like when you go to New York City, you're walking around a lot outside, and that you're running into people smoking, you know, outside of a building or as they're walking or whatever. So definitely it's not that different, but I do see more smokers in France than America. Why are French guys so attractive?
Because they're assholes.
I don't think so.
Because of me, of course. Look at me.
French people are very arrogant, and girls like bad guys, you know?
Maybe because they are hairy.
Because when you're a foreigner and a French person speaks in English, we have such a sexy accent.
So this is a very interesting topic for me because, you know, just superficially, a simple answer is yes, Americans find French guys really attractive. And a lot of it is kind of unexplainable. Like I was saying, we have this obsession with France, and even people who have no interest in French, have never, you know, thought to study the language, have never watched a French movie with subtitles, they have on their bucket list to go to Paris. And so there's just kind of this cultural thing that's passed down somehow, that French people in general are very attractive and some of the most attractive in the world, but especially French men. Not that French women aren't, but more so, you know, French men have this idea, just like we have this idea that Paris is the city of love, and okay, well, whatever that means. So one thing I always like to tell, you know, anyone who has an accent, I remember when I was in France, a lot of times people would apologize for their accent when speaking in English, and I just thought that was silly, because first of all, it's awesome that you can speak another language and you're attempting to speak another language, but second of all, we Americans are really obsessed with accents. Really, we find them attractive. I should say not we, but I, and people I know do. Yeah, it just makes us want to help you and answer all your questions and get you whatever you need. And if I had the time to study, or if I was a sociologist, I would love to kind of delve into the research more of when this obsession with France began. I think it has ties to World War II. Maybe a lot of, you know, servicemen on their way back to the United States stopped in Paris and just fell in love with Paris and came back with these stories. There was a French actor who was pretty popular, you know, in classic Hollywood times, Charles Boyer, and he's kind of the typical French debonair kind of character. So I wonder if, you know, how much influence he had, because he kind of exemplifies of what I think of when I think of an attractive man. It's him, you know, very smooth and confident. So for whatever reason, French people, you know, please don't ever feel self-conscious when you come to America, because we will love you. Why are French guys so good in bed?
Oh wow, I'm a virgin.
Again, the hairs.
Those questions are crazy.
Because we invented love. And then we learned the Kama Sutra. And we use it every day.
I've never compared with American or any other.
Some of them are amazing. And some of them are like terrible.
Well, that took a different kind of turn, and since I can't add to this conversation, I will just leave it there and we'll wrap it up. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sure you know, just like every French person does not share all the same opinions. I'm just one American in a country of more than 300 million. But these were my thoughts, and I hope you might have learned something from them or enjoyed it. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.